Good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Suchman. I serve as the Chief Marketing Officer for Audacy. My good friend Tim Mapes, who serves as the CMO of Delta Airlines. Before we get started, Tim, I just want to say, as a really proud Brand Innovators sponsor, one of my privileges is to sit on stages with your peers across multiple industries. And as part of that, in the setup to this, in the wind-up, I get to interact with the teams around the CMOs. And to a person, your team is just so outstanding. So,
thank you.
Team Delta, here's to you. Okay, so let's go. CES, right? Here we are at CES. It's a harsh start to the year, right? It's like getting kicked out of a warm bed over Christmas right onto a hardwood floor. But now that we're in it, you're kind of feeling it. And if you take a step back and you think about what CES is all about, CES is where companies come to reveal what's next. It's innovation, it's technology. That's it at its core. And that's, if you walk around the floor, if you listen to these talks, everybody is talking about what's coming. And then Delta says, hold my beer. And they introduce and announce free Wi-Fi. And I don't know how many, hopefully we're all Delta people here, but that is a game changer. So let's start with that. That is just such a big baller move in the industry. Talk about that a little bit, Tim.
Wow, what a great way to begin. First of all, thank you for the kind comments. I couldn't agree more with the comments about the corporate communications, brand comms, and employee comms team, many of whom are in the room right now, all of whom torched their holidays to ensure that what is visible, hopefully to you guys, has been of the quality that it has been. It's been 9 months worth of work for what this has become. I'd also like to thank each of you guys for making time to be here today. There's a lot to see and do at CES that you took the time to be here this morning. Grateful to y'all for doing that. The announcement we made yesterday, if you happen to miss it, and I hope you didn't, is that as of February 1st, we're going to free Wi-Fi on Delta. And if you're a corporate traveler, you may say, what big deal is free, right? Because I'm already able to write it off. But it's really, what you would find interesting is the average flight on Delta has 4 out of 10 people in the SkyMiles program. So 6 out of 10 are people we don't necessarily identify or interact with, because clearly if you're a SkyMiles member, we're able to know you, track your data, follow up with you, email you. But more than that number is not in our ecosystem. So the growth opportunity to get to know them better, and if you haven't followed some of the news, the way you access free Wi-Fi is to join SkyMiles. Joining SkyMiles is free. But in so doing, we're then able to track what it is you're behaving and doing with Delta, and start being able to say, well, have you downloaded the app? Have you got the co-branded credit card? Do you have a SkyMiles membership? Hey, the next time you travel internationally, might you want to consider Delta Premium Select? And obviously then gets into that ecosystem. But the highlight obviously is connectivity. The bigger story, I think, ultimately is what's still coming, which is what that pipe, with that connectivity and that capacity, is going to allow from an entertainment standpoint, from a content standpoint. So there's certainly the baseline functionality and connectivity of texting and email, and no charge to that for what we believe will be, we carry 200 million people a year, 100 million of whom are SkyMiles members today. But there's every reason to believe 200 million people will be SkyMiles members, because if 100% of the audience that we have the privilege of serving join SkyMiles, that's what's to come. So it's an opportunity to really build a dual directional, we hear you, what would you like and value more from us, and how do we better serve you? So connectivity is an enabling function, but it isn't the end story.
So to that end, as you were doing this, I noticed on flights, even in December, the Wi-Fi experience was changing. And it was on a New York LA route. And I assume that's probably one of your, the bigger routes. And it wasn't asking me to sign in with my paid subscription. It was asking me to sign in with my name and my SkyMiles account. And then I was just in there. And it was a very different experience. Were you testing it first and just putting it out there just to see how it would work?
Yeah, we have 8 a day between New York and Los Angeles, wide-body aircraft, big planes, and different types of applications. But what Paul is saying, if you've ever flown us and activated or gotten on what was a GoGo-enabled system, a Ku-band Wi-Fi stream, frankly, it was not a great experience. It was a lot. Sometimes you'd get dropped. You wouldn't necessarily know it. Where we are is a Viasat-enabled Ka-band. I don't mean to tech out on you, but it's so much better and so much faster, as is the user experience, because it's like a hotel where once you've logged in and you ever go back into one of those hotel brands, you're automatically on. It's very similar. So once you have joined SkyMiles and once you've logged in as a SkyMiles member, the system itself remembers that, and it's a much quicker, more reliable, and ultimately faster, because you may know we didn't allow streaming before. This now allows streaming, so the bandwidth is greater. The content that will move through it is considerably more attractive, and the experience itself is faster and easier.
It's it's just amazing. And we talked about before this session how it's better for the industry when all airlines do well. This is about being a leader and setting pace. So congratulations to you and the team on that. So, all right. So now let's get started. All right. My name's Paul. This is Tim. Let's go away from Brand Delta for a second. Let's talk about Brand Tim. One of the things that I find interesting in my career, particularly as this next generation of people are coming up, is you see career paths that first I did this. First I was an information designer. Then I was in UX. Then I went and I was saving the world in Alaska. Then I went over here and did that. That traditional career path of up that way, you don't see it as much anymore. And then there's Tim. We both started our career at BBDO. We learned a service-first focus. We learned about the art of creativity. We learned about strategy. And you were at BBDO 4 years. Then you started at BBDO working on the Delta account, migrated over to Delta, 30 plus years at the company, 14 plus different roles. Now you're sitting as the CMO. Tell us about that career path. I find it super inspiring, and I'm sure a lot of people out here who are thinking about their forward careers will find it interesting too.
Well, that's very kind of you to ask. If anybody has ever spent time working at an airline, you realize if you don't like it today, show up tomorrow, because it's going to be totally different, and it is. I mean, those 30 years, it'll be 31 in May for me. There's not been a single year that has been anything like any of the others other than the chaos, right? We've had 9/11, we've had Chapter 11, we've had COVID. So none of those 30 years has felt like, oh, this is a 30-year career, as has the different roles. I'd go all the way back really quickly, and if we can jump in Mr. Todd's Wayback Machine. It was actually Bewitched, a TV show that led me to want to get into advertising, because if anybody here is familiar with that show, right, like Darren Stevens had this beautiful wife, Samantha, and he got to go drink martinis with Mr. Tate at lunch and play with art boards. And I was like, how do you go do that? Like, I wanted to go do that.
You got married. You're there. You've obviously
I'm
done
one
that.
for one.
Yeah.
And so I actually didn't know you could go do that. I also thought you went to college like you went to high school, like whatever the school that was closest to you. I was an absolute, I was going to say moron. I'll say moron. I was not in any way clear on what the track would be, but I knew that communication I just found it fascinating that words and pictures and images and music and audio can literally change the world, and it does. Ideas, creativity, and not creativity in the form of art, but creativity out of creating something that wasn't there. So I went to college, was able to learn that you actually could advertise or major in advertising. Was lucky enough to get into a management training program at a different agency, Bozell, Jacobs, Kenyon, and Eckhart, that I don't even think exists anymore. And then BBDO, which was, for anybody, if you want to be a great client, be a former agency person. And if you want to be a great agency person, be a former client, because those two worlds are so integrated, and yet so few people understand the other side. And when you do understand and can relate to and really get what an agency team is dealing with, because as much as they may be committed to your brand, if they don't really know the depth of the brief, the clarity of exactly what is keeping your client up at night, which clients don't tend to share, right? Then how could they possibly do their best work? And we were both blessed to be at a place that, as creatively driven as BBDO is and was, really devoted a lot of energy into training account people. And that served me incredibly well.
So what was the career path inside Delta? What was your first job inside Delta?
Like a pinball machine. So I started My team at BBDO oversaw the integration and the introduction of Delta when Delta bought the Pan American assets. That's how far back we're talking. In 1991, in November of 91, right after the Lockerbie crash, if you remember that, the terrorist incident, Delta bought the assets of Pan American and overnight went to Africa, went to Bucharest, Budapest, places a lot of people at Delta at that time, and I don't mean any disrespect, hadn't been outside the shade of the flagpole at the corporate headquarters, right? And overnight we're in Russia, overnight we're in Africa and all these crazy places. And so my team at BBDO was tasked, and it went literally from inconsequential, right, a young kid being responsible for international to all of a sudden international mattered, but nobody had really paid attention to international at the agency up until that point. And so all of a sudden I was in meetings with some pretty legendary names, and they're sitting there listening because they had no idea how BBDO actually did the things that we did. And that went well enough that in May of 92, this was November of 91, that Delta said, hey, would you be interested in coming over? Which took me less than 12 hours to say, oh, of course, and join the Delta side. But that was international advertising, that it was international plus domestic, and then it was marketing. And it's been everything from SkyMiles to Delta.com to reservation sales. And, airlines are a great training ground because there's all these different functions, but at the core is this nobility of serving others, right? It's a definition of hospitality. So while we all do different things, we all do them for a very similar reason. And it's such a special culture at Delta that the people who are genuinely there for the right reasons, which is serving others, find career upside for sure.
I was thinking about Pan Am because that's just like a classic American brand, right? It's a global brand, but it was like in the classic age of American branding. Another acquisition you made was Northwest. And it was really interesting to watch that brand migrate into the Delta brand. And you did, Northwest had a big footprint and you took it in slowly and then it was gone and it was all Delta. That was an amazing transformation too.
Yeah, it's at the time, that integration, if anybody here was familiar with Northwest Airlines, they were not particularly warm and caring, but they were incredibly operationally reliable, right? They actually had a saying that their markets were cold and dark, but they were theirs, Detroit, Minneapolis, and places like that, Alaska. And Delta was this warm and caring, and still is, entity, but candidly would hold a plane and wait for a connection to grab 8 other customers who would have misconnected if we weren't waiting. And so the mashup of 1 + 1 = 3 was operational reliability and expertise from Northwest with warmth and caring and hospitality from Delta that in 2008, done well, led to what is now the company that is what everybody here is experiencing.
So let's go to Brand Delta. Let's transition over to Brand Delta. We share a brand promise of human connection, but yours goes beyond that. Yours is physical connection, human connection, real connection. And if you all think about it for a second, you think about the brands you interact with every day, like your personal brands. A lot of us would say Apple. A lot of us would say Patagonia. I see a couple Patagonias out there. And if you think about if you're a Delta SkyMiles person, you're checking that app almost every day, even if you're not flying. You're looking at your miles. You're seeing how many MQMs do I need to get up to gold, to get to platinum, to get to diamond. What is it about Delta? Like, why is there so much brand love for the company?
I have to say, from the inside, it's our nose is so firmly on the grindstone. It's wonderful to hear you use us in the same breath as some of the other brands you just mentioned. We're so busy trying to figure out where we go next and how we better serve each of you in this room and all the rest of the world around you that it doesn't feel that lofty, right? It feels just every day, just keep hitting it. This idea, though, if you're familiar with our tagline, it's keep climbing, which just disallows any notion of stagnation, right? No matter how well we might have done yesterday, it's continuous improvement. It's basically based on the idea of Kaizen in Japan, of just continuous improvement at every level of the organization, no matter who you are. The other part, and you mentioned connection, is yes, it's connection from A to B in a position, but it's also our belief that the role that we have the potential to play is connection to the greatest amount of what we're each capable of. the highest order of what that is. If you have been to Ukraine, then you might be reacting to the war in Ukraine quite differently because you've met Ukrainians or you've known those cities. If you've been to these places, there's a different aspect of empathy and understanding simply by having been there, right? And so this idea that no one better connects the world, which we believe we do better than I'll be honest, whether it's Facebook or Meta or Teams, and no disrespect to any of those other companies, but we literally connect the world. And then when you think about this Wi-Fi and where we're going with this, believe that a company can be bigger than an airline and bigger than just a US-based global airline and occupy a space that the world needs now more than ever, which is a unifying force for good that brings about empathy and understanding and diversity and inclusion of all types of travelers, because we serve the world. We have 200 million people in 60 countries served by 90,000 people, right? And so all of that rich diversity is an opportunity if it's brought together. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's why I don't think it ever feels like, oh, we had a really good day or a week, because it's always about what's next.
So that brand promise, it lives as strongly inside the organization as it does to your customers.
Yeah, I think it actually is stronger. You mentioned the Northwest integration. There were people on the Northwest side that were luminaries at what they were responsible for at that airline who did not make the integration team or a subsequent role within Delta because of cultural fit. And Delta is such a values-based, purpose-driven enterprise that we make decisions in terms of talent and acquisition and retention that you may be amazing and technical proficient at a certain thing, but if you're not going to play well in the sandbox with our 90,000 team members and the 200 million people we have the privilege of serving, you're just not going to be there. And it's not mean-spirited. It's just, that's just not what we're about. And the emphasis is on, again, we have this belief of a service leader culture. So the triangle, the CEO is at the bottom of the org chart, pushing resources up to the 90,000 people who are serving you as customers, not top down in some kind of archaic way of thinking about an organizational process.
It's amazing. And you see it with your team. I mean, it's great to see your people living that value every day. So you announced free Wi-Fi. Anything else coming in the first quarter? What's the first quarter marketing roadmap looking like?
Well, it's lived through the next 24 or 48 hours. And the announcements we've made go live February 1st, and they are domestically and largely in North America. We've got to do 120 wide-body aircraft. Satellite Wi-Fi is being figured out. Viasat does Air Force One and a host of other military aircraft. So they're infinitely capable of that. But it's going to take a while. We have over 1,000 aircraft that are going to ultimately have to be configured. So this will start rolling out. And as many of you hopefully have already experienced it, as you said, Paul, on your flights. But it's got to be a critical mass by February 1st. And you will continue to see us add on to that. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but there's more coming in April because, again, once that platform is in place, the real next questions are what content do you want to run through that? What capabilities would you as customers find the greatest value in? How do we enable that? And listen to you. I call it listen, respond, listen. This 200 million people, there's 1 million letters of complaint written a year to Delta. Every one of those is a gift because every single one of those is an opportunity to make us better. And if you took the time to write a letter in this day and age, you're probably not going to include one issue. You probably have 5 issues. So every one of those is absolute gold. And by the way, our teams sit and read every single one of those. And if you've ever flown Delta and gotten that survey request after, there's a 23% open rate on those. Our chief operating officer watches all that information, our customer care organization. So we don't just try to fix the issue as it might have pertained to you. We try to fix the issue systematically so that other customers don't encounter those same things.
It's almost like real-time NPS scores.
It is.
Every
It's
time.
exactly right. Yeah. No, we track NPS weekly and report it out. It's in our incentive compensation as an executive team. And it's a term and an understanding known by our frontline employees for that very reason.
Wow. So different, a lot of us at platforms, we're just lucky that the bathrooms are stocked during the day. So it's super interesting. And so just going back to that, like as you talk about innovation, I think about that. One of the things I'd love to see is sometimes the plane lands and I'm still watching a movie and I want to take your movie library with me. And I actually waited till the Sad Triangle was a movie. I don't know if anyone's seen it. It's a pretty interesting movie. I finished it on the way out. That was great. So when you're thinking about your media mix, how is that going to change in 2023? Are you moving more things into digital? Are you moving away from big mass, like as you're getting to know really what you're doing is part of this is it's good for business and it's good for the company because you're getting that first party data. How are you going to use it and to market in the future?
I hope you'll remind me of the second part of what you just said. I'll share an example of what's coming that you guys may find interesting. Today, when you fly, and it was a great intro on diamonds and platinums and gold, so thank you for that in the boarding process today. The reality is today, when you fly, customers tend to know I'm getting close to 1 million miles, or I'm about to hit platinum. But if you think about it, we know that because you're in our SkyMiles database, and we have somebody in marketing and in SkyMiles tracking that information. But what if the flight attendant knew that? What if, more importantly, the screen that is sitting in front of you said the minute you hit it, because every flight, as you know, is tracked in nautical miles, so we know miles. What if the moment you actually crossed 1 million miles, up on your screen pops, you just crossed 1 million miles? What if the flight attendant knew that? We know all that data. It's not important that marketing knows it. What matters is, does the flight crew know it? Does the pilot know it? What do they do when that takes place? All of that is coming. Literally, all of that is coming. Content, the ability to stop and start or subscribe and watch other things. Obviously, when you have this type of connectivity, there will be specific content in kind of a walled garden, if you will, that is complimentary and free and available to you through partners that we're in the process of announcing, Paramount yesterday and others to come. I know Atlas Obscura and New York Times and some of the other ones that we've already announced. So this ecosystem of people, once you think about it, you're on a plane. This is one of the things I found fascinating. People on a plane, when some other airlines have taken screens off the seat backs, we kept them on. That's at weight premium, and you have to continue to invest in that technology because those are largely, as was pointed out to Ed yesterday, dumb screens, right? That they can be and will become smart screens that are interactive and dual directional, such that you're able to do a lot more with those screens. Then the content that's running on that can be much more self-directed. So it's you subscribing or signing into something. And what if all of that then came off the screen on the seat back in front of you and was on the mobile app or on your personal handheld device? Right now, the average number of people who are signing into Wi-Fi on these Delta test flights is 3 devices. Think about that. Why would you take screens off of an airplane if there's that many? And think about it. If you watch, and we do ethnographic research, and you just watch, somebody has got a screen. They're watching CNBC or CNN or Fox News live, right, or ESPN or sports. They've got a phone probably for email or for texting, and then either a laptop or a tablet for work or something else. I mean, there's somebody, Ed mentioned it yesterday, there was somebody in one of the test flights that had 6 different devices going at one time. Right, so the world is getting.
Check that person, see what they're up to.
It's an Audacy subscriber who's.
Let's hope so.
But if you think about like that range of content and that interest in consumption live on a plane, the richness of what that can ultimately enable, that's the opportunity, and that's where we're trying to get as quickly as we can.
So the 3 screens are typically the screen in front of you, your laptop, and then your phone. That's the trifecta of screens. That's really amazing. And so, it just comes down to experience, just delivering that experience over and over and over again.
In a way that you want, right? Because SkyMiles obviously is data. Data is yours. It's not ours, right? How we are sensitive to ensuring the trust that you would be placing in us by virtue of us having that information and you actually opting in. Because what's central to all this is we will be able to better serve you the more we know you. But that's a trade, right? That's you sharing information with us, whether it's your preferences or your own information in your content, but then us demonstrating trust back to you in how we bring that to life and better serving you. So this can't, no disrespect to NASCAR, but it can't feel like NASCAR where we're going to bombard you with things. It's the exact opposite. It's how do we use that to kind of curate the types of things that you would find an interest in and bring that to life. I was sharing with someone yesterday that the average person, when they're thinking of a vacation, sees a palm tree in their head. They don't necessarily know the beach they want to go to, or they see a golf course. They don't know whether it's Ireland or Scotland. They see a mountain. They don't know whether it's Colorado. And I'm not big, just it's broad general things. What if you could take, hey, you've got this number of SkyMiles and give you curated examples of things we know through your behavior that you would find an interest in and limit the communication to the things that you would find most prudent and cogent in that process. And so it's not mass, just spray and pray. It's the exact opposite if we do it as well as I believe we will.
I wasn't going to ask you this, but you brought up Colorado, so you opened the door. I got a son who's a sophomore at Colorado, and he said, and we were talking about this conversation we were going to have, and he said, I got a question I'd like you to ask, Tim. And the question is, why, this is a hard hitter, why did you get rid of pretzels and bring sun chips, the cheddar sun chips on? He's a big pretzel guy.
I think in the I don't have a good answer for that.
I told you that was going to be a hard one.
The one that we try to keep is Biscoff cookies. That's
we were talking about that. Yeah, everybody loves those.
Our flight attendants are absolutely brilliant. They can make desserts out of Biscoff cookies. They can make cocktails out of Biscoff cookies. They can make sandwiches. It's absolutely amazing what our crews do with some of those things. Pretzels, I think, are rotating through along with sun chips and other things. We try new things out again based on what we see in consumer data. We hit some clunkers from time to time like anybody. It's hard to argue with pretzels. Maybe sun chips was the wrong answer for your son. Well, see, this is the value in data. We'll know when he's next on us.
I'm going to send that in
that we will
survey on the way
share
back.
that in the snack basket. Yeah.
He's flying actually tomorrow back from New York to Colorado. And we don't even have time for this, but I just sort of, as you were talking about that data experience, who drags off of who? Does Amex drag off of Delta, or does Delta drag off of Amex, or is it a totally symbiotic relationship?
It is a totally symbiotic relationship. They're the most significant strategic partner that we have. And as you might imagine, obviously we know your travel behavior, your flights, where you're going, whether you've been upgraded or flights delayed or misdirected bags or any of that. Amex knows obviously so much more about you, but so too do hotel partners or many, many others that we've got. So it's a symbiotic relationship. But our point is that whoever's closest to the customer needs to be Delta, period, right? It's your loyalty is to us. And there are people who may have greater loyalty and affinity for American Express than they may have for Delta. Obviously, there's other airlines you have to fly from time to time. Can't always be on us necessarily, depending on the destination. But we don't want anybody between you and us in terms of the relationship we intend to build and the emotional richness that can come from that. Again, earned, not promoted or pushed or marketed as much as it's earned through service. So that's really the way we think about it.
So I'm going to ask you two more questions, and then we have just a couple of minutes left, and then we'll try to get a question or two in out here. As you've been traveling the floors at CES, making the rounds, you, Ed, the team, what have you noticed? Has anything stuck with you that you've noticed?
How much money is spent trying to get all of our attention, right? I mean, it's just unbelievable. And this isn't even fully back in terms of scale, right? I mean, China is still largely shut down. Large parts of Asia aren't here this year. I think they were hoping for 100,000 visitors. Based on everything I've seen, it looks like we've hit at least 100,000 visitors. What's interesting, though, to me is the hope that is evident in all of innovation. I mean, there's clearly going to be some things that don't work. When we were here 3 years ago, my wife was actually riding on a suitcase that was motorized, and she had just gotten on it after Shaquille O'Neal did and was driving around on this floor. I don't think that company made it because that was right before COVID, right? I mean, I don't think they sold a lot of mobile driving suitcases, but that's actually not the point. The point is innovation is, by definition, an expression of hope. Like, what can we be and are we capable of as a culture, as a people, as a humanity? And that's all on full display here, whether that's Impossible Burgers a couple of years ago, whether that's sustainability and the great job John Deere did with their keynote. It's that sense of hope. That's what I think is so exciting, is innovation equaling hope for a better future.
That's pretty awesome. That's a great answer. So I'll ask you one audio question since I'm an audio person. What do you like to listen to? What do you listen to when you're not
This is going to be
higher?
I run every morning, and it is locked into the late 80s and early 90s. So I'm typical boomer. It's sometimes podcasts. I love The Daily by the New York Times. But if it's not that, it's Van Halen and Guns N' Roses. And I know it's funny. My kids are 23 and 26. They listen to this Zen, cool, soothing music. And I was like, what has happened to people? I mean, it's like fascinating because like I just blast till my ears, you're just ringing in running. So it's more 80s and 90s music that is almost embarrassing to admit.
Did you see Snoop last night? I don't know who saw Snoop last night, but he went early 90s. He understood his audience and went for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just there's not better music. I'm sure Big Chill. If you watch that movie, remember they were locked into the music when they were in college. I guess maybe that's just what happens to humans.
So we have about a minute or two left. Please.
Tim, I have a question for you. How do you convince shareholders? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Christy. I'm from Scripps Network. But here's my question. How do you convince shareholder value that this technology is worth it? Certainly, we've seen what happens when you don't invest in it, worst case scenario. But how do you really
Yeah, the reality is right now, Delta gets $1.20 for every dollar the category earns. So we're already generating a 20% premium to the industry. The reason for that premium is people prefer the safety, the cleanliness, the on-time reliability, the service levels that our people deliver on a regular basis. I'm not saying we do it all the time, because we don't. I mean, we're imperfect like anybody else, but we do it more often than anybody else. Cirium, the global source of on-time and safety and reliability, just for the second year in a row, named Delta that. To your point on Wall Street, it's where does that return on investment manifest? And it's somebody's willingness to choose Delta when they could choose any number of other brands in contested markets, which is the vast majority of the United States. There's no market that one airline necessarily dominates. And when they do choose Delta, to be willing to pay a premium. So this expectation and this investment is that 20% is to us a floor, not a ceiling. And where do you mentioned Apple. I wouldn't even, when I replace my phone, it's what's the next Apple product, with no disrespect to Samsung and other brilliant places. That's what brand loyalty gets. I'm not concerned about what the other competitive offerings are. I'm interested in what's next from the brand that I love. And that emotion leads to brand loyalty beyond reason. That is why we all go to Disney and feel great throwing money around. Like, you come back and it's the world's happiest place. It's like, what? Like, there's kids screaming. It's hot as hell. Right? I mean, that's what brand love is. So, we don't have any problem, nor did we, taking this to our board of directors or others, provided we continue to generate that type of loyalty and premium.
The well-hatted person in the front row.
Ariel with Brand Innovators. First of all, your team is amazing. Oh, thank you. Rasan Johnson and my sites. I mean, you just have such an incredible organization, and as well as your comms team. And then internally with Brand Innovators, we all fly Delta, by the way. Just such a huge fan.
Mark.
So I'm curious, just as we've all had experience with your team members, how are you pushing your organization to innovate? What are the tools you use? What are the principles you lead with? It just seems like, you're obviously continually elevating and innovating. How are you pushing that across your organization?
You use push twice. I don't push. I try to support. I try, most importantly, to listen, because the talent that Betsy, who is here, Gina Laughlin, and our marketing teams have attracted to Delta is to me world class. I mean, and you're very kind to say that, but it is true. I mean, it is. There's just no doubt in my mind. This is the most talented group of people I've ever had the privilege of working with across disciplines and at varying stages of their careers and different diversity profiles and everything else. So I try to listen. I clearly, they would disagree with that. They would say I do push, or I'm pushy sometimes, but it is so talented. Like, the work that began do what we're doing here 9 months ago came from 100% not me. It was them and different people at different aspects who had different insights, and to just get all of them in a room and just hear and see what the one thing I will take credit for is none of us is as smart as all of us. And I say that regularly because it's demonstrated to me over and over and over. No one person is an airline. No one person runs comms. No one person speaks on behalf of all customers. And so we have all this rich talent and understanding, and former agency people on PR and ad side as well, that just brings greatness forward. And all I have to do is say yes to it usually, and try to get the resources in the team to the team members, like additional team, to be able to help these folks do what they do so brilliantly. That's very kind of you to say, so thank you.
Awesome. So I think we're going to have to wrap, and I apologize that we don't have time for more questions. And I'm sure everybody has something they want to ask or show or communicate with Tim about. We will make sure you have his team's contact info, but he has got to bolt to another session. So we're going to end it here. Tim, you are terrific. I love this conversation. Thank you so much.
Big round of applause.
Thank y'all.
Oh, yeah.